I'm joined by global events analyst Marco Vicenzino. So, Marco, how much do you think this canonization will help with Christians who feel persecuted across the region?
Basically, it's a day of solidarity for Christians in the Middle East who are vastly dwindling in numbers. It's also a day of unification for them. But really, in terms of the plight of Christians in the Middle East, it won't do much to change their plight. What I mean by that is that the fact that many of them have been victimized in terms of persecution, discrimination. Also, if you look at places, the worst off they are in Iraq and Syria, where they're completely leaving. For example, if you look in serious Christian villages and towns during the ISIS offensive in June of 2014, many of them fled. Many of them were persecuted. Many of them were enslaved. Some were, some of them being crucified. And in Syria, you see also with the beginning of the civil war in Syria of 2011, many Christian communities also at the hands of jihadists have fled. So it is a dwindling community. It's a community that goes back to the earliest times of Christianity. It's a community also that needs help from the outside. And the Pope, and part of he has several elements and components to his mission, but one of them is interfaith of Christian minorities in the Middle East.
How do you think that those remarks will be interpreted by Israel?
Well, this is for Israel, it's a difficult situation because in the recent days, the Vatican has officially recognized the Palestinian state. Before, it was the relations with the PLO. Now it's a Palestinian state, and that definitely riled the Israelis. They expressed disappointment, but there's two views here that have been emerging in recent times as the peace process has practically completely stalled. From one view, which is supported, the Israeli view, and also supported by the American government, is the fact that the peace process needs to be concluded before a Palestinian state can get recognition. Well, the peace process has been stalled for many years, and as a result, many other countries, particularly throughout Europe, are saying that since the peace process is stalled, we want to try to jumpstart it, and we're going to go ahead and recognize a Palestinian state. Many parliaments in Europe have either given recognition to the Palestinian state, or some of them have given non-binding legislation, passed it and approved it, recognizing a Palestinian state, although it may not be recognized by the government, but it's an important symbolic move by various parliaments within Europe.
Do you think there's more scope for Pope Francis to play a bigger role in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process?
Pope Francis will not make or break a peace process, but it can be enormous value added because he's a voice of moral authority internationally. So in that case, ultimately, a peace process, a real substantive one, would need proactive support from the Americans, the Europeans, and regional players. Countries from the Gulf, particularly Saudi Arabia, and also Egypt, would play key roles. And ultimately, it has to be Palestinians and Israelis coming to the table and making the hard choices. The old saying of the devil being in the detail, this is such a case.
And Pope Francis is very much more active on the world stage than his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, isn't he? What do you think that's down to?
Basically, he is to be proactive in the sense is that if you look at, not his predecessor, Benedict XVI, you look at John Paul II, in the early part of his 27-year papacy, he was determined to bring down communism, and he played a key role in that. But it was a different world. It was a world of communism and democracy. The enemy was clear. In today's world, there are a lot more different threats. There are a lot more. It's a multi-centric world we're living in. So the geopolitics of the world makes the Pope's mission far more difficult and far more complex. If you look, for example, in the Armenian question, the Armenian in April 24th of this year, the Armenian question, he officially recognized it as a genocide, which definitely angered the Turks. There was also his approach. He played a key role in brokering the rapprochement between Cuba and the U.S., which is still developing. And there are many, many other issues where he's been proactive. So this is definitely a political pope who wants to put his imprint on the diplomacy and foreign policy of the Vatican.
Very interesting, Marco. Great to talk to you as always. Thank you very much.